In space, no one can hear you quote it. Here's your look at the Hiya toys, Alien Colonial Marines, Xenomorph Raven. Exquisite Mini is a new standard setting series for 1/18th scale, featuring super articulation action figures under Hiya Toys. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping on my outer locked door. Before we get a closer look, though, at the Xenomorph Raven, let's go ahead first and grab the ruler to see how tall the figure stands. You'd be looking at a figure that's about 6 1/4 inches, or about 6 1/8 of an inch, or you're looking at a figure that's 15.5 centimeters tall. For the scale of the figure, we might as well stick with something large, and stick with the Colonial Marines. Here he is, next to the Crusher Xenomorph. A really neat looking figure. And if you did want to see what it looked like next to something smaller, just to see how small it actually does look, here it is next to the Grid Alien from AVP. See the size difference? I can't believe how much bigger Xenomorph Raven is. Both not the same size though as Crusher, but then to be fair, the Crusher is also on all fours. The Raven, as you can see, is only on its hind legs. For the figure's accessories, Raven Xenomorph comes included with not one, but two display stands. The display stands, yes, are identical, but you get two of them at least, to give you a larger footprint, of course. When you're dealing with an alien of this size, you can't just deal with one display stand. That's not going to be nearly enough. No, it needs a bigger real estate space, so you get yourself two. And yeah, in case you were curious, on the bottom of these work the same way. There's open slots on all the sides of the display stand. In this case, you get yourself one set of eye brackets, as you normally would be with getting with the other Xenomorphs, for example, and they just normally would attach to the bottom of it and keep the two display stands together. Sometimes, though, I do notice, as you probably already have seen here, some of the grooves are a little easier and hold the eye bracket better in place. In this case, while I don't think anything has been changed necessarily, I find the eye brackets sit really loose on the bottom of these stands. Sometimes it's not always the case, sometimes it is the case, and in this case I actually did drop one of the eye brackets onto the floor. Oh well. But you get two display stands. We can put those certainly to the side, and then also to come included with the Xenomorph Raven, you get a couple of different swappable hands. You get a pair of somewhat considered relaxed hands. As you can see, the fingers are extended straight like this. Just to, by the way, show you what it looks like on the defaulted hands. See, these hands are slightly more bent. He's got more arthritic fingers, whereas these ones are the more straight hands. And then another option available that they did include, not just one set of hands, but a second set as well. You get these ones that give you sort of a creepy looking, almost like crawling into someone's room. Just you see the shadows of these hands sticking out like this. Again, just to show you what it looks like, the difference between the two. Not that much different, although the fingers are just slightly bent, just a little bit different than the ones that are actually stock on their hands. You know, I almost don't even feel like just putting the figure down here. I don't feel almost as if these hands were even necessary, because they're so close to the hands that are already on the sockets of the forearms. If anything, I would just have said, give us the one set of hands, and I'd be happy with just the ones that are currently in the forearms right now. That being said, let's go ahead and pick the figure up. It's a lot bigger of a figure, and it's certainly a lot scarier of an alien as well. What I like about this one is it has decay going for it. The front of it almost kind of bears some resemblance to a pirate. The patch on the one side of the eye, okay, and then the other side also looks a little bit like the alien newborn from Alien 3. I do like the kind of juxtaposition where you have the one side of the face is slightly different than the other. It's not a symmetrical face at all. I guess this is what the alien would have normally looked like, with the smooth dome covering over top of its eyes. And then, of course, yeah, when it starts to decay and chip away is when you actually see the Xenomorph skull underneath. Not that already aliens weren't scary enough, but the fact that you have like this decayed side of the face of the Xenomorph, it's a really neat touch. And I really like the look of this one. This one also has a mohawk of spikes sticking out the top. It kind of looks a little bit like Mohawk Gremlin. I really like the way that they've also got that. And now this is softer plastic too, so it's not as brittle for, if you worry, for example, that those could potentially break. They are a little more of the softer variety. Some really nice sculpting on the side of the face. It really has a nice side portrait. They've also added what looks to be almost like a rusting of brown across the sort of, I don't know, sort of ridges of its bones on the tops of its skull. The actual back of it, if we just cover off the front face of the Raven and maybe cover off even the spikes, it actually looks like the back, like abdomen of a cicada or like a cockroach, for example. very like the look of this one quite a lot. For the body, though, I mean, there's not much that does get changed, although it's just a lot larger of a figure. We can also bring in one other figure for comparisons, just again to show you guys the size and difference between the two. This is the Blowout alien from AVP. And while you get a much bigger looking alien here with the Raven, a lot of the same traits carry over, at least from the rib cage, the abdomen area, and the types of arms that they have. You're getting very similar arms, just slightly changed differently there on the forearms or up in the shoulder area there. Also, the tubing on the back of its torso is very different from what we're also getting here as well. The tubing also has what seems to have articulation, so you can actually hinge these up and down. Not always the case. And I do like the fact they actually put in some articulation on the tubes. It's nice to be able to go in there and be able to move these around. It does still have the fin crest here, which does seem to be removable, although it looks like it's probably going to be a little harder to pop that out. But there is a little bit of posability there as well. So you can have it a little bit closer to the head, or if you wanted to bring it further down, you can then also bring the head further back. Let's just say, for example, if you wanted to have it on its on its all fours, as opposed to hind legs. Long, very long tail. Really kind of like the sinister look of its tail on the back here. It almost looks more like something that would be on the end of a spear. I would imagine that it would probably use that to impale its prey. And again, it does have a wireframe, so you can bend the tail around and get it into the pose that you want. In a case like this, I almost don't know if I would rather display this figure on all fours. It sort of almost lends the idea that it could be an on all fours Xenomorph. But I think I might probably lean toward the idea of displaying it on its hind legs. The thing about the hind legs, though, is the problems with the feet I've noticed here. Well, it does have a hind leg hinge. You'll see right here. It doesn't have a swivel. So it almost kind of feels like the legs right here, like I feel like the feet should have been able to swivel back and forth. You can kind of get a little bit, but not as much as I would hope. I feel as if they probably could have just put that on a peg joint where you'd be able to rotate this back and forth, because it doesn't always give you the most stable of balancing here. Then, of course, one thing I also really like about this figure as well, I'm going to kind of just move its arms slightly out of the way, is a very different type of thigh piece. You see how it spikes up like this? Very, very cool. It's a very nightmarish looking Xenomorph. Probably one of the reasons why I like the design of it so much. Okay, so let's talk about the articulation here on Raven Alien. Head rotates back and forth. Of course, it is on a ball joint. It's actually on a ball joint in two places. There's a ball joint right here where this head, right here, I'm not sure why I'm hovering so much with my hands, but this actually sits on a ball joint. It's right there. And then there's a ball joint at the base of the neck, so you can actually hinge the head further down there as well. The mouth does also open. Did we touch base on that already? We haven't. Okay. You can also bring out the inner mouth. Tiny little chomper there. There we go. And it also has some really nice additional rusting as well. I almost feel in a case like this, because it looks almost more like a pirate skull, I would almost want to keep the mouth always open. And I just would probably just keep the inner mouth inside, tucked all the time. I think that would look really nice and eerie. The figure also has an upper torso ball joint. So yeah, you can rotate all the way around on that. The arms, little on the tight side on mine, but it should be able to give you a swivel joint all the way around. It gets, although a little tight when you're dealing with the top, sort of the way they've sculpted in the shoulders here. It gets a little harder to bring the arms all the way around, but at the very least, you can hinge them further back. You can obviously bring them further forward. There is a double hinge on the elbow right there and there. And of course, you can bend the elbow that way. And of course, there's a swivel in the hand. You can rotate that all the way around. The legs, though, for the fact that it does have the longer spiked ends to it, you still can hinge the legs forward and back this way. You can also bring them back this way. A little on the loose side, I will say, on my figure, but not to the point where it's going to cause the figure to fall over. And again, you do have the peg holes on the undersides of the feet, so yeah, I would certainly say use a display stand. It's there times 2 after all. Figure does have a double hinge on the knee. It's a little loose there, unfortunately, on mine. And the figure does also have a hinge joint on its hind sort of ankle area of its foot, and then there's also articulation here in its toe. If you do have, by the way, any issues with the figure standing easily, as I've certainly said in other reviews, just have the tail sort of serving as a back supporting tripod leg, and that's more than enough to keep the figure from falling over. And then again, as we already looked at, you get yourself 2 display stands, so they're there anyways that you can attach to the underside of the figure's feet. And then one last time, we can just move over the Raven Alien, I should say. And we can bring in the Crusher Alien, also again from Colonial Marines. The departure of design here is very well noted here, on my part at least. I really like that these are so different than what we conventionally get from a Xenomorph design. I also like the idea that Hiya Toys didn't just give us your traditional big chaps and alien warriors, that they also gave us some pretty interesting designed aliens here from the Colonial Marines line. I wonder, though, still sticking with the smaller scale as what Hiya Toys is also so well known for doing, I wonder if they could ever get into the Kenner line of alien and predator figures. That probably, I would imagine that licensing is already tied up probably by the likes of NECA, but maybe if they could get around it and release smaller scale 3 3/4 inch figures, keeping again the design of what is so cool about those Kenner figures, I wonder if they could probably do a really good job of doing 3 3/4 size of those figures. In the meantime, though, for the oversized figures, once again, we can bring in, let's just bring in the grid alien one more time, just to put in proper perspective, not knocking over the figures in the process, but just bring in, once again, the grid alien just to show you how much different in size. Realizing the error of my ways, I probably should have just left well enough alone, but there's the Raven alien, balancing things off. I don't have this problem at all with Crusher alien because, of course, he's on all fours. There we go. Just bring the camera back over. Yeah, how much different in size. I mean, when you're looking at a traditional Xenomorph here, how much smaller it now seems when you compare it to the likes of both the Crusher Xenomorph and now the Raven alien. Really interesting designs on Hiya Toys' part. And again, I'm so thankful the fact that Hiya Toys would even give us designs from Colonial Marines. Some of my favorite, not so traditional Xenomorph designs and creations. When I did do the review of the Crusher Xenomorph, I may have also mentioned in that video that my local comic book store, they also had another oversized alien that I didn't think I had in my collection space. I was going to probably go back and pick it up. Sure enough, went back to the comic book store, and it was the Raven alien. And then I remembered to myself, I had the Raven alien somewhere. I wonder if it's in the same place where my Crusher Xenomorph was. Sure enough, went back, checked it, and that's where the Raven Xenomorph was. It was still sealed in his box all this time. It's really odd on my part that I would have waited as long as I did to have a look at both the Crusher Xenomorph and now the Raven Xenomorph, as it's two very different looking Xenomorphs than what we're used to seeing from the ones on silver screen. I mean, this one is a little closer to resembling what you would expect a Xenomorph to traditionally look like, but even then they changed the design quite drastically by adding that decayed one side of his face. It looks a bit like a pirate, and the more I look at it, reminds me of One-Eyed Willy from Goonies. This is what a Xenomorph would look like if it came out of One-Eyed Willy. Still, though, I like the additional rusted effect that they've added with the dry brushing of that sort of rusted brown on the top of its dome. They've added a little bit also on the inner mandible, that smaller little chomper that comes out of its mouth, and also on the top of its shoulders as well. It really gives you that idea that this thing's been decaying this whole time. It's a really interesting look for a Xenomorph. Now, this one also is going to be a little bit more expensive than your traditional Exquisite Mini. I think from what I can remember, the comic book store had this one for about I think it was about $8 more than your regular Xenomorph. So the regular Exquisite Minis, local stores were about $26. I think this guy was sitting around more $34 price point. Now, I have been asked before, is that a justified price for these Exquisite Minis? Because again, like if you're looking at the size and the scale of these, they're pricing on average about the same price as what you would be getting for a 7 to 8 inch figure from other companies. I would always use the explanation to people that ask that. If you're in the collection space of getting 3 3/4 inch figures, and you're also into collecting like import figures will always be more expensive because they can't sell these in retail. They're not mass producing these and fulfilling POs for Walmarts and Toys R Us. You're not going to get stuff like that. Instead, you're finding these at local specialty stores and comic book stores. They're producing them at a smaller volume, and they're also importing these figures in. Why the price point is going to be a little bit more expensive. My answer to that, long-winded though, is if you're in the space of collecting 3 3/4 inch figures, Hiya Toys is producing some of the best 3 3/4 inch, or in this case, a lot bigger than 3 3/4 inch, but they are producing some really interesting predators and aliens. If you're not into collecting those 4-inch scale figures, then whatever I say, whatever I do in these reviews, isn't going to sell you on the idea. But if you like aliens, you like predators, and you like the niche of that smaller scale, like I said, Hiya Toys is producing some really incredible designs, not only just in the vein of what we're getting with the silver screen aliens, your traditional big chaps and alien warriors, but thinking as well for the Colonial Marines, some of the most interesting Xenomorph designs out there. Really like the look of Raven. What do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comment section, whether you have picked up this figure for yourself or just based on this review and this review alone, what do you guys think of the Xenomorph Raven? Nevermore. If you guys are new to this channel, by the way, and you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Turn as well on the bell notification so you're going to get those reminders of when new videos are popping up. And yeah, popping up at the very end of this video will be a playlist of all the other Hiya Toys Exquisite Minis I've looked at over the years. it's your best place to check out other 3 3/4 inch, 4-inch scale figures. If you're sort of on the fence, yeah, as to, is this what I want to kind of get into? Check out the playlist. It covers off all the territory over the years. It's going to either sell you on the idea of getting the Exquisite minis, or you'll still be like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to spend the money for a scale this size. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.